Sure, you can introduce me if you want.
Or did you have an introduction? If you can, that'd be great. I'm gonna go back there and check on I'm gonna let Linda and then.
Oh, gosh.
Check.
Well, I'm very excited to see everybody, and this is going to be an awesome program. When you write a book, you finish, and that's only part of it. That's a little part. Then you have to find out what to do with it, and covers, and there's so many things that go into publishing a book besides the writing. And Brian he's an expert. He's awesome.
I don't know.
And so he's gonna give you a lot of information, take lots of notes, because it's gonna be good. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. For those of you who came in and said, I thought Ryan was the one with the long hair. I'm sorry about that. Many of you know, I have a book that is about to be coming out very, very soon. It's very, very late, but it's finally about to come out. And it got to the point where I said, I either need to get a haircut or I need to get a new author's photo. So, for those of you who came expecting rock and roll Ryan and you're getting business casual Ryan, today we're talking about how to self-publish on Amazon like a pro. How many of you agonize over the titles of things? It drives me nuts. I always have to get help. But this one is very straightforward. I've got a new toy. So what are we going to learn? We're going to learn how to publish. How are we going to publish? We're going to learn how to self-publish. Where are we going to self-publish? Specifically, we're going to be publishing on Amazon. I know somebody expressed a little bit of disappointment that we were going to be emphasizing just Amazon, but the reason I'm doing that is because that's sort of first base. If you get on Amazon and you do all the work to get on Amazon, everything else is going to be much easier to do. And it's also, they are the biggest seller of books in the world. They might be the biggest seller of books in history. I don't know. I mean, they have such a huge market share. You can't ignore them, and really it's going to be your first stop. So as an introductory course in self-publishing, I thought we'd start with Amazon. And how are we going to do it? We're going to do it like a pro. We're going to like a professional because, like I said, Amazon has such a huge reach. It is easier today to self-publish than ever in history. It's almost like every single person has a printing press in their house because you can print a book, you can get out there. In fact, if one of you had a file of a book, it wouldn't even have to be complete. I could put it up on Amazon, and if we didn't have to wait for the files to process, I could get that book on Amazon in like 20 minutes. So the bar is very low, which is kind of a double-edged sword because what you want to do is if you want to get up on Amazon and you want to look like a professional, you want to look like your book is worth purchasing because the signal-to-noise ratio is so huge. You want to stand out, and you don't want to stand out because your book looks unprofessional, all right? Let's take a look at the motives to self-publish. Oh, before we do that, I want to just get a feel for the room. How many of you out there are considering self-publishing or you've already self-published? Oh my goodness. Okay, then hey, this is a good audience for this. All right, how many of you have already self-published and you're just wanting to look at some ways to maybe make it easier next time around? Me too. So if any of you have pointers, it can be a little tricky. Finally, and I know a few of you in here have done this, how many of you are planning to help someone else self-publish or have already helped someone else? All right, that's great. Because I know Vicki helped her dad put out a book that it was phenomenal. And so, yeah, and that was fantastic. And so whether you're having a friend, a spouse, a family member put a book out there, this is something we can all use. Okay, so why do you self-publish? Well, first of all, you maintain self-control. I know there are no control freaks in here, but if you are, self-publishing is a great way to do it because you're going to get to be able to do just about everything for yourselves. From the top to bottom, you're going to have complete creative control of a project. You're going to be like an auteur director. You're going to be able to boss people around. Well, you won't really get to do that, but you'll be able to boss yourself around. You're going to be able to find an audience. One of the things with self-publishing, the reason I got into self-publishing is I had a novel, Monsters All the Way Down, and I did whatever, I was trying to do the traditional route first. And I sent it off, and the first morning after I sent it off, I had a request for a full manuscript, which fed into my fantasy of what I thought this was going to be like. I thought, oh, this is great. I'm already done. Booked my cruise, no. And not long after that, I had a request, and that was from a very new agent. And then by the end of the week, I had a request from a partial from one of my dream agents. And it didn't end up, none of them ended up going anywhere. I had small presses that looked like they were going to go. I made it to the last round of that, didn't quite work out. I don't know if any of you know, but horror novels are not like horror movies. I always thought, you know, a lot of directors get their start with horror movies because you just throw blood on it, it looks great. I thought it'll be the same thing with books. It'll be so easy to break in. There's actually not that many agents that even are willing to read that specific thing. So if you're trying to break in, you're going to want to broaden your approach. Maybe, just letting you know. I'm sure your book is much scarier than mine. But I had this book, and I said, you know what? I don't want this to just languish at the bottom of a book, bottom of a drawer somewhere forever. I wanted to find an audience, and it's got great reviews on Amazon. And one of the things I'm proudest of is several people have contacted me and said, I read your book, and now I'm writing my own book, which is pretty cool. I don't know if that was, if he can do it, anybody. But hopefully you'll feel the same way by the end of this, so we'll be good. Getting exposure, this goes a little bit with finding an audience, but there's a legitimacy in having a book published. There's a big difference between I'm writing a book, or I've written a book, and I've published a book. They're all important and all special, but that gives you an in that you might not have otherwise. Like you folks are listening to me, and because I've actually gotten a book and gotten it out there, and I have another one on the way. It's also acted as sort of a resume for me. I do freelance writing on the side, and that's gotten me jobs just because I have a book out there. Oh, you have a book, and I talk to people, and that leads to paid work, which actually pays more than my fiction. So, making money it's the last but not least, but it's not what you want to be emphasizing here at the very start, unless you're a Bethany Claire, who we heard from, and she was able to do from the very get-go, be able to find out a formula that works. I'm still working on that. I'm transitioning from a full-time stay-at-home dad to kind of a part-time stay-at-home dad, so I'm going to have a lot more time. And my goal is to make that last one work a lot better and learn marketing much better. But today we're going to be concentrating on the nuts and bolts of getting your books up on Amazon. So the whole shebang, you need a manuscript, you need editing, you need an ISBN, you need print formatting, Kindle formatting, and the cover. These are all things you can pay for, or they're all things that you can kind of find workarounds for. The manuscript, I can't help you as much, but I will give a little bit of advice on that. First of all, the big question you need to answer is what can I do for myself and what should I pay for? I was talking with my father-in-law, and he calls this a farmer's mentality. Why would I pay someone to do it when I can do it myself? You know what I mean? And that makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways, but it's sort of like I can do some of the work on my car, but if I need anything serious done, you're not going to want to drive in that car if I fix it. So is this within my skill set? Can it be learned? I know when I did my first book, I published it, and I paid for the cover on that, but I did do all the formatting myself for the print and ebook, and it took me weeks to get it right. Yeah, we'll say weeks. It may have been more than that, but is this also something I can do without pulling my hair out? If it's something you can pay a reasonable sum for and have it done extremely well, it might be better for than something you spend a month on and it's not as professional as you'd like it to look. But we'll talk about all that. Be part of the solution, pay people for their work. There's a movement online, and in freelance writing we call it them content mills. And there are places like Fiverr and places like that. You can ask people to do things like a cover for your book for $5. That's really great that we have these opportunities for people, but I don't know if I want to trust the look of my book to someone for $5. One of the cool things, especially with my second book, which I've built, I hired I have 8 illustrators, several different people working on it. I've gotten to build this kind of network of people that I can trust to do quality work. And it's quality. You also want to be one of the good guys, and you have to remember we're all in this together. And the more, this isn't one of those things, you put good energy out into the universe. You know? I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying, when you work with other people, they'll remember you when they need a writer, or they'll mention you. It's a way to build opportunities beyond an anonymous person doing a $5 job for you. All right, so let's manage your expectations. There's a very good chance this could cost more than you expect, and it may take more time than you expect. Some of you might be pleasantly surprised that it's cheaper or shorter than you expect, but I can guarantee that it will be satisfying to put a book out. It's one of the most satisfying things I've done in my entire life, is actually finishing a book and getting it out there for the masses. Funding your book, you may want to start planning now. Remember, day jobs are our friends. Crowdfunding is something I have done and I was successful with on Kickstarter, but I want to say to use that with caution, because it's one of those things where once you do it, it might be one of those kind of one-shot situations where you go on and all those people who love you may be willing to be very generous, but they're not going to be able to do that every 6 months for you. And also, I think there's a credibility issue, especially with publishing, where everything you do is on Kickstarter. Some people make a career out of Kickstarter. So if you're able to do that, God bless. Indiegogo, there are many options, but use that with caution, and there are other options. Something I'm doing right now is I'm saving money as I write for my next book that I'm putting out. I'm trying to plan ahead so that I can do everything as I go. But let's start with the manuscript, the cost. No man can say. It's very expensive. In time, it's very expensive. But just some quick things. I wanted to give you some lists of different options for writing your manuscript. I personally use Word. I have some good friends who use Scrivener. Ulysses is another option. I believe that's Mac. If there are some free word processors, if you want to try something. These three at the bottom, Focusrite, Write Monkey, and Hemingway, those are very minimal. And the point is to make it so you don't have distractions as you're writing. I did, I wanted to give kind of a word of warning. I wrote my first novel in Google Docs and then moved it into Word for formatting, and it was a pain. It may have come, this was 3 or 4 years ago, so I'm sure they've made improvements since then. But when you're writing, you want your book to be as far along as you can, just to save yourself some work. So these are all great. I use Google Docs for a million other things as I write, like supplemental files to keep track of characters. It's great for that. But that's how I've done it. Some free unsolicited advice on finishing your book. You want to meet with other writers, so pat yourself on the back. You're all doing that today. Good job, guys. Find a critique group. I know that this is something that's a struggle for many people. And that's something we as a board here at THBW are trying to work on to make it easier for you guys. But if you're able to find a critique group, whether it's something that meets in person or online, you want to do that because it will bring your writing so far along. You want to plan specific times to work. That's better than just saying, I'm just going to stay up late every night. I tried that for a long time, and I became a basket case. Set goals and keep track, and don't look back. Finish the book. This is something I debate with some friends on. My philosophy is if you finish that first draft, you can fix anything. You can fix anything, but if you never finish that first draft, it's never going to be done. So, I need to pass something around before I forget. Sorry about that. If you don't want to have to take too many notes, I'm going to email out notes for everyone. So if you'll just give me your name and email, and if you'd like to, you can also sign up for my newsletter that I put out monthly, and that includes updates and some free stuff online and a free short story every month. So if you'd like,
this around, and don't be concerned that Mike and I didn't write our names down. We're already on his list.
they're on my list, and they'll get the notes. But if you don't want to be on the mailing list, that's totally fine. I will send out a separate mailer that's just the notes, and they'll have lots of links that I'll mention in here that so you'll be able to get them.
Ryan?
Yes.
As to your planned specific times to work, in June I heard Jody Thomas speak to a group. Most of us were writers.
Yeah.
But she made I thought, a telling comment. She said, in order to create your world in Word, you have to create a world for yourself to write those words.
That's good advice.
So is a lifestyle commitment. And I found it helpful too, inspirational, to read about Winston Churchill, who managed to write about 50 books during his rather eventful life. And, you know, the secret for him was he had a ruthless discipline about writing.
Yes.
And he put out this image of being, living this life of leisure on a country estate. But after people left at night, he would start writing at 11 o'clock and work till 2 or 3 in the morning. And this is how that he got all of that accomplished.
It's a good time to do it. Unless you're taking care of babies. You don't want to do it if you're taking care of babies. That was my time for a while. I tried the 11 to 2, and oh my goodness. But that's fantastic advice. Set aside time. I know a lot of people recommend every day. For the book that I'm about to put out by the end of next month, I actually worked, Sunday was my work day, and I would just work all day every Sunday. And it took a little longer, of course, than if I were writing every day, but I set aside that entire day just for me to write. And that was what worked for me. So the important thing is consistency, whatever you choose to do. If you want more advice on finishing your first draft, you'll have to invite me back for second draft or bust, or finish your book before it finishes you. I was going to say finish your first draft before or die trying, but I said that's a little hard. So this is I'm still working on those titles though. You want to avoid Ryan McSwain's mistakes with your title. When you're working on the title for your book, this is something I think that gets overlooked a little bit in this process. You want to brainstorm as many as you can. You want to get outside input. You want other people to weigh in and say, that's terrible, or that's great. And make it easy to remember. One of my first beta readers told me, oh, I keep telling people I got to read your book. I loved it. I tell them all about it. And I try and tell them the title, and I just can't remember what it was. That was a failed title. So I tried to fix that and keep it suited to the genre. Now, editing and proofreading. Now, that number is a little scary. Estimated cost $500 and up, but there are ways to work around it, and this is also the most expensive part of this process. But we're going to talk about what that is. Why is it the most expensive part? Because it's time-consuming, it requires specialized knowledge, and you want it done right. How many of you out there have helped a friend edit a manuscript, like an entire book? It takes a lot of time, right? I recently, a very good friend, I went through his book, and it took me about a week and a half of free time to go through and really get all those commas right. So this is something that you're asking for a huge commitment to do. That's why it's more expensive than a lot of these other things, because you're asking for a lot of time and knowledge to go into this. Now, why you should pay for professional edit? Typos and grammatical errors are going to affect your reputation. I was able to get a top 100 Amazon reviewer to do my first book, and he gave it a glowing review. I was thrilled, but at the end he said, and the typos barely bothered me. And I died. So it will affect your reviewers, and a lot of people will stop reviewing and maybe even stop reading if they see enough mistakes. Reviewers will not be kind. Let's see. Once you've done a few drafts of that book, once you have gone to that forest, chopped it down to the ground, regrown it, chopped it down again, built condominiums, you're not going to be able to see that forest for the trees. They will all be invisible to you. I did the math. My latest one is about 100,000 words. Even if my mistake is only 0.3%, that's 300 mistakes. And there were a lot more than that. Okay, I think with one of my primary editor, who I paid, he came back with 3,000 edits, and that was after he'd already been through. Now, most people are better writers than me, so you may not have to worry about that. But it will be out. You want people to catch all those problems, even if they're not. A lot of mine weren't necessarily even errors; they were suggestions, things like that. So you're going to get a better book if you go through this process. Now, a good proofreader, and we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between a proofreader and an editor, because those terms get thrown around a lot. You want to know exactly what you're getting. They're going to help you address typos, grammatical errors. They will help you catch inconsistencies. Anyone ever had a character's name just changed in the middle of a book? It only happened in one chapter. I had a Brendan changed to something else. Brandon? I don't even know how it happened. No inconsistencies. And it also addressed style problems. If you're someone who doesn't agonize over the difference between an M dash and an N dash, it's something that a proofreader can help you with. Proofreading versus editing. Editing is a much more extensive process. It's also called content editing. This is what people usually think about in terms of when you get an editor. It's someone who's going to go through and help you with story level and scene level problems. If you can only afford one, you want the proofreading, because the other one you can. That's something beta readers and critique group and all those people can help you with. But if you don't have a proofreader, people aren't going to give your book the attention that it deserves, and after the love and effort you put into it. What else I wanted to say one more thing with that. One thing that I did find is with proofreading, when I've paid for proofreading, I've also gotten a little bit of content editing kind of sprinkled in as a bonus. I think part of it is after going through that book and spending days on it, they just can't handle something stupid anymore, and they'll tell you about it. So I'm not saying hope for that, but it's something that might come along as a part of the process. How is it different for self-publishers? You have to make every little decision in your book, and those of you who have done this know that. Everything from how you're going to, when I write a date, am I going to write out the words? Am I going to write out, when I say 3 o'clock, can I write 3:00, or should I write 30? You have to make all those decisions there's no one else who's going to do that for you. How will you handle environmental text? For some reason, I'm obsessed with this. But these are little things that you're going to have to decide. Which version of a word? When you go through, you can always say no to changes. That's with your proofreading. You can always say, you know what? I don't want to do that. And that feels really good. But do that with caution, because they're probably right. Don't repeat my mistakes. Have them edit a digital copy using track changes. At one point, I know Mike helped me with a book, and I printed out copies, which is kind of expensive to print out a copy. And he and another friend gave me incredible feedback, and it was invaluable that I got it. But it was more work to put it into the book, because I had to go through these huge manuscripts, page at a time. It's much easier with track changes if you've had a chance to use it. Compile your lazy words. That's, for me, everybody falls down in a heap. For some reason, every 20 pages falls down in a heap. So I get that out of there. Maybe have people fall over less. But also really lazy adjectives, some easy adjectives like little, big, huge. I'm always describing the sizes of things. You want to compile a list of those things that you do specifically, and do a control find on those for yourself. Yes.
May I ask, are you talking about excessive repetition of those words, or?
Yes. Well, for me, sometimes it's repetition. Sometimes it's also just that they're usually superfluous, and the manuscript's stronger without them. Like the word "that" is a big example for many people. Sometimes it's absolutely essential, and most of the time you can get rid of it. So you take these words and you just want to make a list of those. And I need to get to that.
Mention like people shake their head a lot in people's books.
This is something we do. Yeah, we always say you need to save your shakes and nods and shrugs and smiles and laughs, because it happens a lot. Yeah.
I find that I look for the perfect word and find it, and then I'll use it another 10 or 15
Well, you don't get your money for it.
So it's so good. It's so perfect that I just keep using it. And
That's good.
I have to do that search thing.
You do have to do it. Control F is your friend. Finally, when you're working with an editor, unless you're paying them a huge sum of money, you are working with a person many times in their free time or with other projects. I've found you want to establish a deadline and then make sure you have a buffer. All right? You don't want this to be something that you do when you have a pre-order set up on Amazon and you are up against the wall. You want to give yourself plenty of time, because it takes a long time to do this right. Questions: what service will you provide for the price? Do you have experience in that book genre? If you have someone who only reads historical fiction, they're going to have a little trouble seeing what makes sense in your sci-fi. But of course, there will be things that cross over. But if they have experience in the genre, that's something to take into account. And how will you receive the edits? You want tracked changes on the digital file. It's the best way to do it. Because what that means is, if you haven't used them before, it will show what it was originally, and then it'll show the correction. And you can look at that and decide, accept it or decline it, and it'll make it so much easier in the long run. Cost-effective options, we should all do this anyway, but buy a Chicago Manual of Style and just do what that says. Proofread for others, and just like your mother taught you, use that power of guilt. All right? If you said, I read your book, I'm going to read my book. Utilize your critique group. I was going to say exploit your critique group, which is what I feel like I did.
Hey!
I did feel that way. Hey, I thanked you profusely.
All right.
But utilize your critique group because they're invaluable every step of the way. Recruit beta readers. I did mention critique groups are great for the proofreading. I found beta readers were really good for content editing because they are if they read your stuff, that usually means they like to read anyway, and they'll tell you if something just doesn't make sense. They're the ones that are going to cast that stuff. So recruit them and make use of them. And when in doubt, I mentioned this to Taylor the other day, and he was like, that's a good idea. So I thought I'd share it here. When in doubt about grammar, use Google. Put that, like for me, it was recently a sentence started with for, such as like, for when the window, I can't remember, but the sentence started with for, and I was like, I can't remember if you put a comma after for, if it starts a sentence in that kind of weird way. So I put it in quotes, I searched, and then on Google, you know how you can click on images, shopping, maps? There's one that says books, and you click that, and it will search within books. All right, does that make sense? And so you can see how everybody else, whether they put a comma after for, or whatever it is.
It does help a lot.
See, it is a good cheat. Just make sure make sure you look at it as an actual book. Because sometimes it searches within things that you don't want to take the advice, but you look through 3 or 4 pages and you'll say, I have a good idea of what the general use of commas would be in this situation. Okay, before we talk about ISBNs, we're going to take a very short detour. Let me see how I'm doing here because I love to talk. So we're going to go quick through this. When you are deciding to self-publish, you must make the decision whether or not you want to become a publisher. Of course, anyone who puts out a book is, by definition, a publisher, a self-publisher. But you want to know if you want to go through the hurdles of making it official. Benefits of making it official, you get a little more added control with the way things are done with your ISBNs and your records on Amazon and other other retailers. Consistency over time. If you use an ISBN through Amazon, you can get a free one, but it's stuck to Amazon. And if something changes, it won't be the ISBN for that book anymore. You'll lose those reviews. Consistency over time. Legitimacy. This isn't a matter of trying to trick people into thinking you're a real writer. But I've had several people ask me, I say I self-published, but then they go, well, then who's Pethos Publishing? And I'm like, I'm Pethos Publishing. It's like the call is coming from inside the house. There's greater opportunities for expansion. My ultimate plan, I would love to, I was just talking to some folks earlier about this, I would love to eventually publish other people's work. I would love to bring something that's been out of print, bring it back into print. So there's lots of opportunities if you jump through these hoops. And I don't know if you saw it, you can do it for like $16 because this is how you do it. Small Business Development Center, and I will send out all these links if you don't want to have to try and decipher them. So what do? You have to decide on a name. You do a name search. It's free to do it at the county level. It costs $1 per search to do it at the state level. If I have that wrong, I apologize. I just checked this out. You file a doing business as. It's $15 per county. I went ahead and did it in Potter and Randall because I thought, maybe someday I'll buy myself a building and put Pethos Publishing on it. And I don't want to know, Anyway, it's $15. You know what I mean? When you're dreaming big, you dream, $15 big. You're going to maybe need, if you're planning on selling books in person either way, you're going to need a sales tax ID. So that's something you do through the state. And you'll need to know your NAICS code for book publishing. 51130. For some reason it was hard for me to find that, so I thought I'd go ahead and share. Like I said, these will go out. You want to be a sole proprietor versus LLC. I know Bethany Claire, when she spoke, she started as a sole proprietor and it immediately became obvious she needed to be an LLC. I have not had that problem yet. But sole proprietorships are very easy. It's just a matter of saying you're a sole proprietorship. I do have to pay. I can't do the free tax version anymore with the TurboTax. That's the main difference. But if you're a person who has like a person that does your books and things like that, you can talk to them about LLCs, and that's going to be something that helps you out. Now, what is an ISBN? The International Standard Book Number. This is a number that the cost was, it surprised me that it was as much because it's been a while since I thought it. Now, should you purchase your own? You don't have to. You can do this without buying one because Amazon and Smashwords, all the online retailers, they'll provide them for you. But why not? It'll stick with the book even if you change printers. Or if you're using multiple printers. We'll talk about that for something else. It allows you to name the publisher instead of just, because it will say, Amazon will be named as the publisher. You can pay $10 and insert your own name on Amazon, and that might be a more cost-effective way to do it if you'd like to try it. Part of becoming your own publisher, if it's just part of doing it all official. The cons: there is one distribution issue with Amazon distributing to libraries and schools. I noticed that if you don't use theirs, but there are workarounds for that as well. So, and if we get to that when we talk about distributors, I'll be sure to ask for some input. Benefits of buying a whole block. You saw it was $295 for 10. We'll look at the prices real quick. One is $125. This is a monopoly in practice. There's only one organization that does all these ISBNs, but you have to have them. So it's one for $295, 10 for $295. I've been using the same 10 for a while. As I mentioned, you need at least 2 per book because you're going to have one for the print, one for the digital, and the different kinds of digital books need their own ISBN. So if you're publishing a Kindle publishing on Kindle, that's one. If you're publishing an EPUB, it's another one. But that's probably
Audio is another
and
one.
audio is another one, and we'll talk a little bit. I haven't done the audio adventure myself, but there are some people. It's a great way to do it. So audio is another. IBA, which is the Apple format. Yes, sir.
I'd hated to disturb you, but my wife has a distinct concern about products that might be later associated with the book, like possible movies or toys in the store.
Oh, yeah. If you're wanting to do things like that.
So the question to be is there any connection between ISBNs as an original mark and the copyright that might go with the following?
You know what? I didn't talk a lot about copywriting and trademark. It's sort of a bigger deal, and I probably should. Publishing a book automatically gives it a copyright. All right, that instantly becomes your work, and you don't have to mail it to yourself or anything like that. It is copyrighted. You can file for a copyright, but it's generally not necessary.
Still, it's the ISBN.
And then there's an ISBN it's just the barcode. I should have been more clear. I'll grab a book.
It's the identifier.
It's the identifier. There's a 9-digit one and a 13-digit one, and it's not associated with the trademark.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. As for trademarks, the way that generally works is that's something I am not familiar. I am not a lawyer. I'm not a trademark attorney. Yes.
One thing, if you go to Bowker or whatever to buy your ISBNs, before you go through the shopping cart, however many you're going to buy, go online and look for a coupon code because sometimes they have them for 30% off.
Thank you. I didn't know that. 30% off's a lot.
It's a lot. If you're buying 100 at a time and it's Bowker.com is where you get the ISBN.
Okay, thank you for that. Be sure to
Spell that.
BOWKER.
Their website for buying is myidentifiers.com.
Yes, that's it.
But it's all Bowker. They're the only ones who do it in the United States, and it's not very kind to self-publishers, but we're talking about publishing on Amazon.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're monopolies around here, I guess. What else was I going to say? Buying in bulk does save major moolah. They aren't transferable though, because as soon as I saw it, I could buy 100 of them. I could just get my friends to pool the money. That you can't do it that way. They are tied to a person. If you die, you can pass them on to someone, or you can sell them to someone as a whole bulk, but you can't, and I guess you could find some, maybe there's some tricky ways to work around, but it's pretty clear they're tied to a person.
I'm not
or a
sure
publisher.
that you can't, I was gonna say, I think if you loan them out, and they use your publishing company,
That's a different, that's
That's
a
a
whole
different
different ballgame.
Yeah.
And that's something about when you're your own publisher and you're helping other people get published.
yes.
That would be a great way to pool your resources.
Yeah.
But 100 of them would last me for a very long time. So I'm planning on, that's something I'm planning on doing soon.
No.
But no, I just mean, but also that would be, I would have that'd be one less hurdle for publishing someone else's work. They would say, I don't want to mess with all that. Well, I have a whole pocket full of ISBNs. I had a coupon. Yes, I'll do it after, I'll do one more thing and then we'll do it. It will also offer to let you, they'll try and upsell you with a barcode when you buy them. You don't need that because Amazon automatically generates it. There's plenty of free versions online. That's batteries at Radio Shack, which I don't even know if that's applicable anymore. Who goes Radio Shack? Don't tell him. Okay, let's go ahead and do a quick break and then I'll do we want to do 10 minutes or 15
Yeah,
minutes?
let's do 10 minutes.
Yeah, we can
Yeah,
do
let's
some
do
quick,
questions.
I'd love to do some questions and then we'll talk about some more. I will tell you that after the break, we will talk about print. We will do a very quick round of print formatting, cover design, and Kindle formatting for ebooks and Kindle. So we will get to all that. But what question did we have?
Go back to something you said real quickly. You said EPUBs have to have a different ISBN
Yes.
versus what? What EPUB?
We will talk about all that. There are three major mainly two major file formats. There's EPUB, which is what everyone uses except for Amazon, and then Amazon uses Mobi, which and we'll talk about file formats, but those are the main ones, and then Apple has their own as well. So, but with ISBN, with the way that they work, it tracks each specific type. It would also, if you printed a hardcover, and we'll talk about something about that, a hardcover would also be a separate ISBN. So it's each version of the book needs its own. And I know and like I said, when I saw the number, I go, oh, I thought they were $10 each, but that's only when you buy a whole lot of them. Someone else had a question?
Okay, I have some disabilities.
Okay.
And there are some things that I can do, there are things that I can't do.
Of course.
It has kept me from publishing for a very long time, like 40 years. I think I'm borderline, I may be borderline cerebral. And I have been told my work is phenomenal.
Right.
But I'm having some issues. So.
Well, I'm hoping that we can walk you through some of these things, and it'll show, because this is literally something anyone can do.
I'm actually a kinetic learner.
Oh, well, good. Well, I don't have too many hands-on today, but we can take a look, and we'll talk about some more of these things as we go. And you had one?
Well, I just want to add to what she's saying because I know her husband, I know her. She has the classic 50% block. I'm halfway there, and I'm swimming back.
I understand.
So
yeah, we'll talk about all the things you need to do to get things formatted and ready to go in the next hour. So let's take it.